To pastor a Reformed church in Milan is a great challenge. And I think it would be a great challenge nowadays to be the pastor of any Reformed church in Europe. Being the pastor of a Reformed church, of a confessionally Reformed church, means being a minority. We are a minority in respect to Roman Catholicism, and we are a minority also in respect to evangelicalism. It means being much alone and not understood, often misunderstood or marginalized. It means being willing to face the reality of a perceived irrelevance when in many evangelical circles being relevant is what Christianity is all about. It means learning to walk before God by faith and not by sight. You feel the sense of the missionary mandate God has entrusted to the church. People don't understand what the gospel is. I was speaking with a friend of mine who participated a few weeks ago to a meeting here in Italy, a meeting of some evangelical leaders and churches, and all these leaders were speaking about how to have an influence as evangelical people on the Italian culture. And they were speaking about this strategy and that initiative and that program. But then, when it came time to define the gospel, which we as Italian evangelicals should communicate to our fellow citizens, people could not agree on what the gospel is. So in Italy, for instance, you have very little preaching in evangelical churches. You have much music, entertainment, dramas, things like that, but very little preaching, very little pastoral care. People are not helped to live in this world as Christians and pilgrims. Sometimes I struggle with loneliness as a Reformed pastor, not having like-minded ministers of word and sacrament with whom to share my burdens, my desires, my passions, and so on. So these are some of the challenges we have, and I have, as a pastor of a small Reformed congregation in such a big city as Milan. The life people live, especially in big cities such as Milan, is less human than it used to be. Since everything revolves around economy and technology, human relationships became more and more frail, depersonalized. The possibilities to communicate with others and sharing things is different from the past. And therefore, even if we live in a city with millions of people, there is not real human exchange. And then you add the pervasive influence of the entertainment industry. You see that the free time people have at their disposal is absorbed by the offerings from the entertainment industry. So instead of spending time with other people, people spend time enjoying themselves and being concentrated on themselves. And so also because of that reason you have less opportunities to share the gospel with people.
When you travel to Italy, what you see are beautiful cathedrals, Roman Catholic cathedrals, dotting the horizon everywhere. And the sheer presence of Rome in the country is almost overwhelming. You can see how Rome has had its grip on that country for hundreds of years. In Milan itself, you go to see the cathedral. The cathedral's beautiful. You walk in, you see the huge columns, you see all the artwork, the statues, the paintings, the music. Its aesthetic appeal is overwhelming. But you have to ask if that cathedral is supposed to be the visible church on earth, if that's supposed to represent Christ's people here on earth, as Rome claims it does, why isn't the gospel being preached there? So there's this strange contrast in Milan. You go to downtown, you see this massive cathedral that's very beautiful. People are there to see its artwork, they're there to see its beauty, but you don't hear the gospel being preached. On the other side of town, you have this renovated computer store that's kind of small and awkward, and yet there the gospel's being preached faithfully every Sunday.
We started this church in 2002. And of course, at that time, the church subscribed to a Reformed Baptist confession of faith, the 1689 confession of faith. So that was from the very beginning a confessional church. We came to a point in the life of our church to question our independency and more generally our ecclesiology. And that because our confession of faith didn't help us to actually apply all the true principles or the true signs of a church. When it came to accountability, to church discipline, we found ourselves under pressures from within and from without, with nobody which could officially and with authority recognize our correct behavior and attitudes according to the Word of God. We were alone in the application of church discipline, and so we were much more exposed to abuses of people who were not sincere and willing to submit not only to the pastoral authority but also to the consensus of the whole church. So that's the kind of crisis we had, which brought me to reconsider the whole issue of ecclesiology and church government. And of course, we had to think more generally about what is really Reformed ecclesiology. And so we gave about 1.5 years to study covenant theology, and all the families of our church embraced a covenantal understanding of the life of the church and especially of the condition of covenant children.
Simone, no.
Aspetta, qual è il tuo unico conforto in vita e in morte?
Devo dirlo?
Sì, adesso!
Che io col corpo, con l'anima, sia in vita e sia in morte, non sono mio, ma appartengo al fedele Salvatore Gesù Cristo, il quale con un sopra il suo sangue ha dato
Aspetta, no, non troppo velocemente!
mi ha liberato dal potere del diavolo e mi preserva, così che
Piano,
senza la volontà
piano!
del Padre mio che ne c'è, eppure un capello possa cadermi dal capo.
One of the most encouraging things that I've experienced in my time in Italy, perhaps in my life, is arriving at that church and hearing the kids recite the Heidelberg Catechism in Italian. And it was tremendous to be able to interact with them, to ask them, what is your only comfort in life and in death? And then to hear them recite this. Question 1, 2, 21, 60. Hearing those kids, and they're excited about it. They're learning the basics of the historic Christian faith as summarized in this wonderful catechism that we have used for centuries. And they're doing it in their own language. What a tremendous foundation to see laid there at that church. And this is all we want to see continue to go on in that country. We want to see more churches planted in Italy where they're confessing these same things.